Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so my name is Riza Batista-Navarro, and I'm a lecturer in text mining at the Department of Computer Science, as Sarah mentioned. My research is basically in natural language processing or anything that has to do with analyzing text. So together with colleagues in our department, we actually look at the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to try to raise people's awareness of the carbon footprint of their home cooking. And I'm excited to tell you more about uh, our ideas around this project. So in the UK, carbon emissions are categorized according to the different sectors which contribute to these emissions. And according to a formal report from BASE, these sectors include energy supply, industrial processes, businesses, transport, public sector, for example, public hospitals and public schools, agriculture, land use, waste management, and of course, the residential sector. In many of these sectors, most of us probably feel like we have very little agency or control over them. So for example, if we want to travel from one country to another, usually we feel like we don't have any other choice but to take a flight, even if we feel, even if we know or we are aware that flying is considered as a huge contributor to carbon emissions. But then we feel like we have no choice, right? However, in the residential sector, we probably have more agency and control over that because these include activities that we do at home, right? And one of the activities that we usually do at home is cooking and dining. So what happened due to the pandemic is that people have actually rediscovered the joy of home cooking. In fact, in August 2022, according to a survey amongst people from 5 different countries, they found out that 40% of people said they are cooking as much as they did before COVID, but then another 40% of the participants said they are actually cooking more than they did before COVID. And in the UK specifically, UK respondents said that in terms of the number of meals that they prepared at home, this has increased by at least 10% pre-COVID, comparing pre-COVID to basically during COVID periods. And additionally, UK respondents said that even 12 months or 18 months after the survey, they imagine themselves, doing more home cooking than they did before. So for us, this seems to be a good opportunity because we know that residential sector is a contributor to carbon emissions, and if people are cooking more at home, then we have an opportunity to reduce these residential carbon emissions. However, for us to be able to do that, we need to empower the public. We need to empower people by means of giving them access to more information about carbon emissions. So carbon emission is not a very well understood concept. So a lot of people have misunderstandings around this. So we need access to this information. So before I proceed, I'd like to invite you to a very quick poll as well. So you can either go to this URL menti.com and use the code that you see on the screen, or I will provide a link on the chat window. You can directly click on the link on the chat window, and then you can participate in the poll. So there's only 2 questions here. So I'm interested in learning whether during the lockdown period you have used online cooking recipes as a one-off, occasionally, once or twice a month, at least once a week, maybe almost daily. Okay, keep them coming. And there's also a second question, so I can go back and forth, so not to worry. The second question being, your frequency. Are you using online recipes with the same or less or more frequency than before the lockdown? Okay, so we're getting same or more frequency. And some people are saying occasionally they use online recipes, and some said once or twice a month. Okay, thanks for that. I just wanted to get a sense of how how many people are using online recipes. Because in this study that I'm talking about, basically we're making a bit of an assumption where that when home cooking, people are actually making use of online recipes. So I did check this, right? So I checked the web traffic for All Recipes, which is basically one of the more popular UK cooking websites. And if we look at the web traffic from comparing it from late 2019 and then during the pandemic, the pattern is actually kind of correlated to what happened during COVID. So for example, in March, we went into lockdown, and this access to allrecipes.com increased. It decreased in September when we moved to tiered restrictions, and then increased again during the second lockdown. Anyway, so basically what I'm saying is that maybe online recipes can be a good channel or vehicle for making people more informed about carbon emissions. Um, in fact, our partners, so we're collaborating with a company called Emission. They are developing services to help inform individuals and businesses about their carbon footprint, or in other words, carbon footprint. If you go to their website, you will find recipes where they actually indicate the amount of carbon emissions per recipe. And if you look closely at each of those recipes, you will find, again, the amount of carbon emissions per portion if you use that recipe. But importantly, they have a suggestion as to what you can substitute any of the ingredients in the recipe so that you get less carbon emissions. For example, here, instead of using beef, they suggest using chicken breasts. So currently, if you want to do this, you have a recipe, you're interested in learning how much carbon emissions it would generate, it's possible. What you can do is you can go to online calculators. So for example, in Vegan Society's website, they have a calculator. You have to encode though, or to input each ingredient that's in your recipe. Or you can use another calculator, which instead of looking at food items, it looks at the cooking techniques and the devices you're using for cooking and the durations. So that's obviously a manual way of doing, or semi-automatic or manual way of doing it, where you have to one by one encode the information. What we're proposing is to automate this process. So basically, come up with an automatic calculator for recipes. So how's it gonna look? For example, taking this recipe, slow cooker beef bourguignon from BBC Good Food, what we want to do is to apply natural language processing, or NLP, to automatically read the recipe, pick up information such as the dimensions of food items, their amounts, the cooking techniques, and the durations, to look up the fork print of those items and cooking techniques from a knowledge base, to estimate the fork print automatically, but also to give a detailed breakdown. So for example, we should provide something like this, where we say, okay, if you cook this, then you're producing 103 kilograms of carbon. The user can click here to see a breakdown, but also importantly, to give an indication of what does it mean? What is it equivalent to? In this case, it's equivalent to 1,000, driving a petrol car for 1,000 kilometers. And lastly, we want to provide also some alternatives or substitutes. So here, for example, saying that instead of steak, you can use diced chicken. So what are we planning to do? Or what we are doing currently as part of this project, because this project has just started. We're developing NLP methods for parsing recipes to identify those mentions of food, cooking techniques, and durations. We want to develop a knowledge base, basically compiling all of the data about carbon emissions, and to make that data searchable. That's in collaboration with my colleague Victor Schlegel, also from computer science. To use machine learning to train models to identify substitutes, and finally to integrate this all in a web browser plugin. So I mentioned suitable substitutes. So what do I mean by this? So here, when we say substitutes, we're talking about suitability in terms of preference. So you've probably heard how people say cauliflower is the answer to everything. You can substitute anything with cauliflower rice, pizza, pasta, and so on. And even recently, I found out that somebody tried to substitute ground beef with cauliflower, which I've never heard of. The point is, just because a food item has lower carbon emission or carbon footprint, it doesn't mean that it's the best substitute for a certain recipe. So we want to learn, the suitability of certain food items in that sense, right? So what we want to do is we want to invite participants to submit recipes they like and use, together with their own suggested substitutes according to their preference. And then the machine learning model will learn from these suggestions, and hopefully learn the trade-offs between carbon emissions and suitability. So for this, we're working with communities such as Real Food Wheat and Shaw and Zero Carbon Harrogate. But I'd be very happy if any of you would like to participate in this study, and please feel free to contact me if that is the case. So Thanks very much. And I think that's all that I'd like to say around this idea.